So we have this organ in our chests, I'm told. I've never seen it. It's called a heart. I'm told that it's there and that we ought to be careful to measure the health of it. But the problem is when you can't see it, how do you measure its health? And so our scientists have been at work for many decades, developing all kinds of ways, from EKGs to blood tests to stress tests to angiograms to MRIs. I'm quickly out of my depth here, by the way. But always in the attempt to find out, how is your heart? How is its health? It's an important thing to do. But, this book says we have a heart, and it's not talking about that organ. And this book is also concerned with the health of that heart. I might call it the heart of our souls. Now, when you read the Bible, it says, first of all, we don't understand the heart. It does things we wish it didn't and causes us to act in ways would be better not to act. But as I read the Bible, I realize that when it talks about the heart in that sense, it's talking about our inner person, our core self, the reality of who we are in our soul, in our self, our mind, all mixed together. It's the core reality of who we are. We ought to pay attention to it, but the question becomes, how do we know if it's healthy? How do we know if the heart of our souls is healthy? Best EKGs and MRIs do us no good there. So how do we assess the health of our heart? I want to suggest to you that it just may be possible to assess the health of our hearts by watching what comes up out of it. But before we go to that, first, a story. 1997, 20 miles off the coast of Cornwall, England. Tokyo Express is the container ship, the massive cargo ship that carries those huge containers to sea. You've seen them, massive containers. The Tokyo Express is slammed by a rogue wave. A rogue wave, I read, is one of those waves that comes out of nowhere. You're not expecting it. That has to be at least twice the size of any other waves around it. So it's a big wave. Suddenly, the Tokyo Express is smashed by this rogue wave that manages to dislodge and knock overboard 62 of those containers. 62 of them go plummeting into the depths of the ocean. Now, certain of those containers had something specific and special within them. They had within them almost 5 million Lego pieces. Almost 5 million. And beginning not long thereafter and continuing up to even today, there are Legos washing ashore on the beach. In fact, one of the ironic themes of the Legos was that many of them were nautically themed. Mask or a scuba diving tank on the back or seahorse or octopuses. I thought that can't be right. Octopuses, that's what the article said. I thought the plural of octopus is octopi, right? So I went and I asked my AI app, Perplexity, what's the plural? And it said the plural is octopuses. And it's always right? So you can't argue with it. But anyway, octopuses, all washing up on the shore and continuing for decades. 28 years later, still finding them. Now, it was a unique opportunity for scientists to be able to do studies. Studies about ocean currents, studies about plastics in the ocean. But I want to read you the words of U.S. oceanographer Curtis Ebsmeyer, who writes about this incident. Listen to what Ebsmeyer writes. The most profound lesson I've learned from the Lego story is that things that go to the bottom of the sea do not always stay there. They can be carried around the world, seemingly randomly, but subject to the planet's currents and tides. Now listen to this. The incident is a perfect example of how even when inside a steel container, sunken items don't stay sunken. Just pay attention to that last line. Even when contained inside a steel container, sunken items don't stay sunken. It's also true of the heart. So that in our hearts, the heart of our souls, those Legos will rise to the surface. And I want to suggest to you that not only do they give us information about what's there, they also help us to assess the health of the heart of our souls. So we're going to go to Proverbs chapter 4 to read about this. Proverbs 4 is a section where the wise man is talking to his son. Now, honestly, it could be a mother or a father talking to a son or a daughter. But the conversation that is about to take place in this section of Proverbs is one of those deep and slow conversations that parents at times have with children. You can't rush it. It's that important. But in order for the conversation really to take place, you have to have their attention. And that's where it begins, Proverbs 4, verse 20. He says, "My child, pay attention to what I say. Listen carefully to my words." That first verse in the section is the key invitation. It's the call. It's the invitation. It's the mother. It's the father looking at the child and saying, "My child." Did you notice the two words that are next? Pay attention. Pay attention to what I'm about to say. We have to have eye contact. I have to know that you're not distracted. I need you to pay attention. Why? Why is the parent in this case so urgent about the child's attention? Next two verses. Don't lose sight of them. The them is the words I'm about to say. Don't lose sight of my words. Let them penetrate deep into your heart, for they bring life to those who find them and healing to their whole body. Here's why I want you to pay such careful attention to what I'm going to say to you. The words that I'm going to say to you will actually lead to a flourishing life, a life that thrives. It will bring health and healing to you, to your relationships, to your soul. So the parent is saying, "May I have your attention, please?" Now what comes next, the next verse, verse 23, is going to be the most important verse in the section. It's the core of it. It's the heart of it. Let me read you something about that verse from Old Testament scholar Tremper Longman before we turn to the verse. Here's what Longman writes. He says, "The heart is one's innermost being, one's core personality. The father," that is the wise man in this passage, "is not interested in just a superficial response from his son, some kind of behavior modification. He desires that his child be wise at his very core. Actions and speech will flow from a wise character. If he takes the message to heart, then that will lead to life and wholeness." So that's why the father is so focused, so concerned. Pay attention, because what I'm going to tell you is going to affect, it's going to influence the rest of your life at the very core, at the center of yourself. Well, that's a lot of buildup. What exactly is the parent going to say? Proverbs 4:23, the key verse. "Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life." The NIV places that little phrase, "above all else," at the beginning of the verse to kind of emphasize it, give it place of priority. It says, "Above all else, guard your heart." But either way you render it in the English, the point is to say you have to prioritize this. You have to make it a key focus in your life. Guard your heart above all else. That's the first line. There are two lines in that verse. That's the first of the two lines. Guard your heart. Prioritize it. So exactly what does it mean to guard your heart? What's the wise man saying to his child? I don't know, I suppose guard your heart might mean be careful what you put in it. Be aware of it. Your heart doesn't thrive on French fries as good as they are. I love them. Don't tell my wife that. Guard your heart. Be careful what you put in it. Be careful, thoughtful about what you, because whatever you give your ears and your eyes to, you give your heart to. So he says, guard your heart. Maybe that's what he's talking about. Modifying, monitoring what you put in. Or maybe he's saying, be careful on what your heart lingers, where your thoughts naturally go. Because where your thoughts naturally go before you go to sleep, when you're alone in the morning, when you're in the shower, when you're getting ready for the day, where your thoughts naturally go, that has a lot to do with who you are as a person. So maybe the wise man is telling his child, be careful where your thoughts linger. Or maybe he's saying, be careful to live in reality and not in fantasy. Now, I realize that when we hear that word fantasy, many of us immediately go to sexual themes. And that's legitimate. There are those sexual thoughts that come to mind which we are tempted to fondle, hold on to. Maybe that's what he's saying. But don't allow that fantasy to be the only one you think about. What about revenge fantasies? Those people who did you wrong, who said those things about you, and you just play it over in your mind. Oh, if I could do this to them, and then that, and then they'd really hurt. Yeah. He's saying, careful about those. Or what about the success fantasies where you are the hero of every story that plays on the screen of your minds? Maybe that's what the wise man is saying. Careful, guard your heart. He may be saying all of those and more. But that's the first line of this verse. Guard your heart above all else. Let's read the verse again. Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. One of the reasons he's so concerned about heart health is to say, coming out of whatever is there is going to be everything else in your life. So pay attention to it. It determines the course of your life. You know, the Amplified Bible, I think, puts it well when it says, keep and guard your heart with all diligence, and above all that you guard, for out of it flow the springs of life. Out of it flow the springs of life. In other words, it's what's in there that's going to flow everywhere else. There was, many years later, a rabbi from Nazareth who said something very similar. These are the words of Luke's gospel, Jesus speaking, a good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, and an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. Just that simple. The mouth speaks what the heart is full of. No wonder he's saying, guard your heart. There was a pastor, Matthew Mitchell, had what I thought was a great illustration. I thought about using it here today, but then I'd be in trouble with Isaac and Jesse and David and Tim and all these people. So I said, okay, I'll just tell them the illustration rather than actually doing it. So he took up a bottle of water up on the platform, and at a certain point in the message, he just dumped all the contents out onto the stage. Just went everywhere. And then he looked at his congregation. He said, okay, tell me, what is that liquid on the stage? They're all like, we're not in first grade, you know. It's water. He said, why isn't it Pepsi or Kool-Aid? Or I would ask, why isn't it pea milk? You know, like green peas? Pea milk. Now, don't get twitchy on me. Pea milk's some good stuff. I had some this morning. You ought to try it before you knock it. I could see it in your eyes. So why isn't it pea milk up here? Why is that? And he said to his congregation, the reason it's not that is because that's not what was in the container. Whatever is in the container, it's what's going to come out of the container when you pour it out. And that's what the wise man says. If it's in here, it's going to come out here. Or in terms of the heart of our souls, if it's buried down at the bottom of the sea, Even steel containers won't always keep it from coming up. So pay attention to what comes up, because it will tell you something about the health of the heart of your soul. Now, in this passage, he goes on for several more verses to talk about the basic ways we live our lives. He gives some instructions about how we're to live our lives, what is to come out of our hearts, in other words. He says simply this, starting in verse 24, avoid all perverse talk, stay away from corrupt speech, look straight ahead, fix your eyes on what lies before you, mark out a straight path for your feet, stay on the safe path, don't get sidetracked, keep your feet from following evil. He is giving instructions on how to live. He's talking about the basic actions of life. But I want to suggest that there's something even deeper here. What he's saying is, out of your heart will come these basic actions of how you live your life. If you guard your heart, this is how you will live. If you don't guard your heart, you are still going to live in a certain way that still involve these basic actions of life, and that will give you information about the health of your heart. What comes up tells you about what's in there. So I'm going to invite you to do just a bit of an inventory this morning of your own life. Just 2 areas. We could go in a variety of different directions. I want just a 2-part inventory of the health of the heart of your soul. 1, others, and 2, ourselves. Others and ourselves. So here's the first question. If you're trying to examine the health of the heart of your soul in terms of your relationships with others, ask yourself some questions. What characterizes my relationships with other people? Are my relationships with other people, the ones to whom I'm close, the ones with whom I live and work, the ones I know in my social sphere, is my relationship with other people generally healthy? Can we talk? Can we be open? If issues come up, can we deal with them? Can we keep our emotional issues current? Do they like to see me coming? Do they enjoy relationship with me? What is the quality of your relationship with other people? Or on the other hand, is your life characterized by troubled, significantly troubled relationships? And many troubled relationships, regardless of where you are. Do people not so much enjoy being around me, being around you? What characterizes the quality of my relationship with other people? Because what comes up out of me relationally will tell me something about the health of that heart within me. I read, for example, this last week. Little Tyke in the back seat, mom driving the car. Little Tyke asks mom a question, says, Mommy, why do all the idiots only come out when Daddy drives? Ouch. What's the quality of your relationship with others? Read about a young couple having some conflict. They just couldn't get past it, just angry at each other, just trying to find a place where they were on the same page. And finally, in desperation, an attempt for a truce, he says to her, look, if I admit I'm wrong, will you just admit I'm right? She says, fine. He says, okay, I'm wrong. She says, you're right. Desperate, troubled, difficult relationships. What is the nature? What is the quality of your relationships with other people? Because that will tell you something about the health of your heart. Years ago, when I was working toward my marriage and family therapy license, I had a supervisor who said something to me that has lingered with me over the years. I've thought of it many times in the counseling, pastoral setting. I've thought about it in my own life. It was simply this. He said, life, and I would add God as well, life and God have a way of bringing us back again and again to the unfinished parts of ourselves. Life and God have a way of bringing us back again and again to the unfinished parts of ourselves. So that if I'm a person who struggles to be patient, count on it. Life and maybe God will bring me many situations when I'll have to face that impatience. It just keeps bringing me back around again and again to that, in the hopes that I will have the courage to face those Legos of impatience that are coming up from the depths of my heart. However, that's not the way most of us, and I include myself in that, like to live. What we like to live when we get into those trouble situations with a spouse, with a child, with a neighbor, with a boss, with a job, we think, okay, it's their problem. And if we stay with it long enough, we end up thinking, if I can just change the scenery, everything will be good. Change my address. Change my spouse. Change my job. Then it'll be hunky-dory. Copacetic, life is good. That's not the reality. The reality, life will keep bringing you back again and again to those unfinished parts of yourselves. You hear it in those people who make broad and negative stereotypical statements about men or about women. All men are that way. That's just the way women are. Why is it that every woman I'm in a relationship with, this is an issue? Yeah, what's the common reality in all those relationships? You, okay? Because life will bring you back again and again to the unfinished parts of ourselves. Not long ago, somebody asked me the question, how do you know, after a divorce, how do you know that you're ready to re-enter a relationship and get married? How do you know? Now, that's a big question. There are many ways that need to be probably thought through in that. I want to give you just one of the questions I would ask, and it's one of the first questions I would ask. So your marriage broke down, right? Yeah, what happened? Well, there was this, that, the other. It just was a bad breakdown, a bad marriage. Okay, here's my question. What part did you play in the breakdown of your marriage? Well, he was just what part did you play? A person who cannot identify or answer that is nowhere near ready to get into a new relationship, and definitely not into a new marriage. Because there's enough in here that needs to be faced first before moving into that. Andy Stanley, preacher and writer, says, I've tried something, he says, in counseling. So I have this spouse that comes into me, my wife is this, that, and the other, and her mother, and all, or the husband, I can't stand this, and she's talking about the husband, and they're the only one I have in the counseling office. He says, so I take a piece of paper, and I draw a big circle on it. I look at them, and I say, okay, so you're here because your husband is such and so, or because your wife is such and so. This circle on this paper represents all the blame for where you are in your relationship, all the fault, all the responsibility, it's all in this circle, this piece of paper. Now, he hands the paper to him and says, now, I'd like you to draw like a piece of the pie that represents your responsibility. Just draw that. He says they'll draw like this little piece of pie like the size my wife asked for it, just give me a little piece, They'll draw us a little piece of the pie, and you'll say, okay, that's your that's my responsibility. He says, okay, now, since you're the only one here, that's what we're going to talk about. Just that little piece of the pie. Because if you're saying it's all on him, well, he's not here, we can't save the marriage because he's not, I'm talking to you. He says, people generally can't do it. They can't stay in that peace. You want to assess the health of your heart. You want to guard your heart. You want it to be characterized by wellness. Be willing to look at what your own heart is telling you about your life with other people. The truth is simple. Everybody causes joy. Some when they come and some when they go. So just be sure you're not the one that everybody, she finally left. He's finally gone. Now we can enjoy the evening. Ask yourself those deep questions. Don't get into the rut of the person who wrote a prayer I read just the other day that said, God, I need you to give me patience. Because if you give me strength, I'm going to need some bail money to go with it. Okay? So ask yourself, as I stand on this beach littered with Legos, they give me information about the state of my heart. What does it tell you? Are you willing to do something about that? Pay attention to your heart. So that's the first part of the assessment, others. Second part of the assessment is ourselves, me, you, personally. Who am I as a person? How comfortable am I with myself? How able am I to be alone, to be silent? Like you saw in the video, people are saying, I was alone, I was silent, it was nourishing to me. Is that true for you? Or is there a desperate attempt to try to say, oh, no, I need noise, I need distraction, I need something else in my life because I can't deal with all these Legos that keep coming up. Can't do it. John Mark Comer, in his book, Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, writes about this. Now, the first part of this, he's quoting an op-ed piece for the New York Times. Comer writes, as Tony Schwartz said in his opinion piece for the New York Times. Now, these are Schwartz's words. Addiction is the relentless pull of a substance or an activity that becomes so compulsive it ultimately interferes with everyday life. By that definition, says Schwartz, nearly everyone I know is addicted in some measure to the internet. Everyone, says Comer. And then Comer speaks. If you think you're the exception to the rule, great. Prove it. How? Turn off your phone for 24 hours straight. Just one day. Call it a digital Sabbath. See if you can make it that long without giving in to the itch to pick your phone back up or without writhing on the floor in a cold sweat with your teeth chattering for neurobiological withdrawal. I take that kind of personally. What do you mean, prove it? I'm not addicted. I'm fine. And Comer says, prove it, Randy. I said, don't get personal. Don't be talking to me that way. Because the truth is, there is something about this device that I carry in my hand and in my pocket that I clutch close to my heart. That I say, I don't want to let go of this because every time I have an extra moment, I can get distracted in a different world. I don't have to think about myself. My frustration with my wife this morning. My irritation with the drivers on the freeway. The stress of what's waiting for me at work. And the list goes on. So the question is, what is your heart telling you about your relationship with you? Your ability to be with yourself. So I got a text this week, kind of a long text actually, but I want to read it to you. It was a text from a friend named Johnny Vitorovich. Some of you might possibly remember Johnny. He lives on the East Coast. He had a story to tell, so we invited him. He flew out, was here with us at our church last year at camp meeting, 1 year ago right now. Shared some great things with us. I got a text from Johnny this week. I want to read it to you. He says, hey, Randy, I had to share this story with you after listening to your message from last Sabbath. I couldn't help but think of a recent experience I had at Tyson's Corner Center, Washington's largest and most popular shopping mall. Something had gotten wedged into my iPhone's charging port that I couldn't dislodge, so I made a genius bar appointment at the Tyson's Apple store. I figured they'd have some proprietary tool I didn't own, and in a minute or two, I'd be on my merry way. When the Apple genius, which is what they call their associates, I knew that, said, come back in an hour and a half, we may have to take your phone apart. My first thought was, what in the world am I going to do without my phone for all that time? It was almost like losing an appendage. I wandered out of the store and into the mall, aimless and adrift. My right hand continually and involuntarily twitched, reaching into an empty pocket as if repeating the mere motion would conjure up the missing phone. As I made my way to the far end of Tyson's, toward Barnes & Noble, my go-to for killing time in the mall, I became keenly aware that I was all alone in this highly trafficked shopping center. Everyone else around me was holding a smartphone while walking, their heads bobbing up and down in a strange asynchronous rhythm. There was little to no eye contact with anyone, even those in small groups. It felt like a scene from a sci-fi movie. I suddenly felt in the moment, focused, present, and not distracted. Dare I say, I felt liberated. It was just like I'd had cataract surgery, not just for my eyes, but for all my dull senses. I became acutely aware of details in the mall I'd never noticed before. Did they redo the lighting in here? Is that a new anchor store? When did they add that restaurant? I had meaningful conversations with sales associates in stores I'd never even noticed. I didn't sense they were trying to sell me anything. Rather, they genuinely seemed interested and a bit lonely. They could work a whole shift without a conversation with anyone. We got to know each other's names. When does that ever happen? Much to my surprise, I thoroughly enjoyed my distraction-free journey through the mall. I never even made it to Barnes & Noble, and I hardly noticed. I even prayer walked my way through the mall without fighting the urge to peek at phantom vibrations in my pocket, the ones typically signal a missed call or an urgent Slack message. As I made my way back to the Apple store, a small part of me was dreading the zombie-like state I knew I'd be falling back into. When I got home, I told Susan that if you had asked me that day whether I'd choose a pre-iPhone world or the present one, I honestly would have answered pre. But the reality is, we don't have that choice. And I have to learn the discipline of carving out distraction-free moments, to spend meaningful time with Christ, focused and in the moment, making metaphorical eye contact with Him daily, not because He is lonely, but because I am. All the best. God bless. Johnny. The truth is, I don't want to go back to a pre-smartphone world. It has added immeasurably good things to our lives. It's been a blessing that is hard to fully articulate. But, guard your heart, because it can take over. It's worth paying attention to the Legos that arise from within our hearts because they give us information about the health of our hearts, what our relationships with other people are like, our ability to be alone and quiet and undistracted, all tell us things. The old wise man to such themes says, "My child, pay attention. May I have your attention, please? You need to consider this." So, this week, a distraction-free, smartphone-free hour? A distraction-free, smartphone-free afternoon? A distraction-free, iPhone-free day? I'm still deciding. But I hope you'll join me. Guard your heart, because everything you do flows from that.